Marin hadn't bought anything new. She hadn't changed her layout, redecorated, or added clutter. Yet every time she walked into her own living room, a strange heaviness settled over her. Not physical weight, but something else. A quiet tension, a feeling that she couldn't rest, even though she was retired. The walls weren't closing in, but they weren't offering comfort either. Her home, the one she'd carefully built over decades, suddenly felt unfamiliar. Too loud in its silence. Too full in all the wrong places. She found herself walking from room to room, not to enjoy them, but to escape them. A dining table that reminded her of gatherings that no longer happened. Shelves lined with faces that stirred more sadness than joy. A hallway where every step came with a sigh. There was no mess to clean, but something still needed clearing. It took her weeks to realize it wasn't clutter in the traditional sense. It was emotional noise. Hidden triggers tucked into corners, drawers, and memories. And they weren't just slowing her down, they were weighing her down. If you've ever walked into your home and felt that strange resistance, not knowing why the space that once soothed you now leaves you restless, you're not alone. For many older adults, it's not about tidiness. It's about invisible burdens. In this video, we'll uncover 9 specific things hiding in your home right now that may be quietly draining your peace. And if that resonates with you, like this video, subscribe and stay with us, because clarity is just one insight away. Marin had always loved her home. A modest 2-bedroom ranch with a cozy porch, warm yellow walls, and the quiet charm of a life lived deliberately. At 68, she had no interest in moving. She wasn't chasing a minimalist fantasy or looking to reinvent herself. She just wanted to feel good in her space again. But somewhere between the calendar flipping to another year and the last grandchild's visit, that feeling started to fade. She was a retired piano teacher, one of those people who could sit down and play anything by ear. Her students used to say she had magic fingers. Now, she rarely touched the keys. Her piano sat in the corner like an old friend she didn't know how to talk to anymore. The house was still quiet, still hers, but it didn't feel as nurturing as it once did. Folding laundry became strangely draining. Picking up a dropped sock felt like a full chore. Sitting down with a book often led to her mind wandering, not resting. There was no obvious problem, no mess, no noise, no dramatic change. And yet, Marin found herself unsettled. She couldn't explain why she'd get up from her chair 3 times in a row, only to pace the hallway. Why she stared at a drawer, but couldn't bring herself to open it. Why walking in her own bedroom felt heavier than it used to. The house hadn't betrayed her, but had stopped being her ally. She began to wonder if it wasn't the house itself, but something less visible, something woven into the objects, the layout, the unspoken expectations tied to her own surroundings. Maybe the overwhelm she felt wasn't from what was added, but from what had stayed too long. Marin's story isn't about clutter. It's about how certain things, even familiar, well-meaning things, can anchor us to old versions of ourselves. And as those versions become outdated, the spaces we once cherished start to feel like cages rather than comfort. If you've ever felt stuck in a home that hasn't changed, but you have, you're not alone. Marin's experience might be your mirror, and her quiet shift toward peace begins with recognizing what's quietly weighing her down. Trigger 1. Silent walls full of noise. Marin's hallway was a gallery. Not of fine art, but of family, wall after wall of smiling faces, graduations, weddings, birthdays frozen in time. From a front door to the kitchen, she passed nearly 5 decades of memories. Some photos were in gold frames, others chipped or leaning. She hadn't meant for it to grow so large. It just happened over the years. One photo became 3. 3 became 20. And now, it felt like walking through a museum dedicated to a life that kept moving without asking her permission. She never intended for it to feel oppressive. These are the people she loved most. Her late husband, her 2 sons when they were boys, the grandbabies who used to fill the house with noise. But somewhere along the way, those images stopped comforting her. They started whispering, Not out loud, of course, but in the back of her mind, they stirred guilt, longing, a subtle sense that she had to keep up with a life that had already changed. She joked once that she couldn't walk to the kitchen without 47 pairs of eyes watching her. But beneath the joke was a deeper truth. Every photo asked her to remember, to reflect, to feel something. And when you're constantly being tugged toward the past, even by love, it becomes exhausting. Many older adults experience this quietly. We call them sentimental touches or family treasures. But when every corner of the home demands an emotional response, it's hard to feel peace. What was meant to warm, you can start to weigh you down. You may not even realize it until you feel that subtle discomfort when you sit in your favorite chair and see a face you miss more than you want to admit. This doesn't mean removing all memories. Not all, but it may mean rotating them, giving some space to breathe, choosing one wall instead of 5, letting your home honor your present, not only your past. There's no shame in needing quiet, not just in sound, but in emotion, because sometimes the walls really are too loud. Have you ever looked around and realized your home is full of beautiful things, but not peaceful ones? Tell us below. You're not alone. Trigger 2. The paper that never leaves. The stack on Marin's kitchen counter was small enough to ignore at first. Just a few envelopes, some medical forms, a coupon booklet she meant to glance at, and a calendar reminder she never pinned up. But slowly, day by day, that little stack became a silent source of stress. It didn't grow into chaos, but it never seemed to shrink either. It just lingered. Every time she passed it, her mind ticked through a quiet checklist. Did I call the insurance company? Was that coupon still good? Did I already pay the electric bill? The pile wasn't just paper. It was unfinished business. It was reminders of things she hadn't done and couldn't quite bring herself to face. For older adults, paper clutter isn't about being disorganized. It's about being overwhelmed by constant small decisions. What to keep? What to shred? What might be important later? And underneath all of it, the fear of accidentally throwing away something that mattered. Marin told herself she'd sort it tomorrow. Tomorrow after her walk. Tomorrow after she felt less tired. But tomorrow never really came. And as the papers quietly stacked, so did the pressure. The pile became a symbol, not just of clutter, but of deferred decisions, of tasks left unstarted, of a mind quietly weighed down by things left undone. What made it worse was how invisible it was to others. No one who walked into her home would say, "Wow, you're drowning in paperwork." It wasn't messy, it was manageable. But for her, it was like carrying a pebble in her shoe. Small, but always there. This kind of stress is easy to dismiss. But over time, these little stacks, these silent piles, create a sense of failure, like you're falling behind on life. And when you're already managing health changes, social shifts, or the ache of slowing down, even one more unopened envelope can feel like too much. This isn't about organizing better. It's about taking control of the weight behind those papers. Try this. Choose 5 items today. Recycle them. File them. Toss them without guilt. You're not getting rid of paper. You're clearing space for mental peace. Have you ever found yourself avoiding a drawer, a corner, or even a single letter because it just felt too heavy to deal with? If so, you're in good company, and you're allowed to let it go, one piece at a time. Trigger 3. The closet full of maybe someday. Marin's closet was more than shelves and hangers. It was a silent museum of her former selves. Tucked behind the familiar cardigans she wore most days were blouses from her teaching years, jackets meant for outings she no longer planned, and dresses that hadn't seen the light of day since her husband's retirement party. Each item whispered something, not always harsh, but rarely helpful. One silky green top still carried the faint scent of perfume. Another still had a tag on it, bought during a hopeful phase when she thought she might go out more. There were heels she hadn't worn since the last church potluck, scars from vacations she barely remembered, and a drawer of belts from when waistlines mattered more. At first glance, it looked like any other closet, but Marin didn't reach into it to get dressed. She reached in and remembered, and sometimes that remembering made her feel like she'd fallen short of her own story. Many older adults keep clothes not because they need them, but because they represent something they're not ready to let go of. A thinner self, a more social self, a version who went dancing, traveled freely, or felt certain about the future. But over time, those maybe someday clothes start to steal confidence instead of offering comfort. The tricky part is this: the clothes still fit the memories, but not the life. And with every morning Maren stood there staring, she felt the gap between who she was and who she used to be. The guilt crept in quietly. Shouldn't I want to wear these again? Why haven't I tried harder? What if I need them someday? But someday wasn't coming. Not in the way those clothes were waiting for. And that realization wasn't sad. It was freeing. She began by removing just one piece. The dress she hadn't worn in 18 years. The slacks she kept just in case she ever went back to the office. Bit by bit, her closet began to reflect her reality, not her regrets. This wasn't about giving up hope. It was about giving herself space. Because sometimes holding on to old clothes doesn't mean you're sentimental. It means you're trying to stay connected to a version of yourself that no longer fits, literally and emotionally. If your closet is more crowded with memories than outfits you actually wear, maybe it's time to thank those pieces for the life they once supported and make room for the comfort you need now. What's one piece you're finally ready to let go of? Tell us below. You might be surprised how light you feel afterward. Trigger 4. Heavy furniture, heavier feeling. Maren used to love her living room. It was where family gathered, where Sunday afternoons stretched into laughter and old movies. The oversized recliner had been her husband's favorite. The massive entertainment center held not just the TV, but years of DVDs, cords, candles, and old framed photos tucked behind glass. The coffee table, a hand-me-down from her sister, was solid wood, real furniture, as they used to say. It had stood through every season of her life. But now, in the quiet of her daily routine, it all felt immovable. Cleaning around it took extra energy she didn't have. Rearranging anything was out of the question. And walking through the space, especially at night, meant navigating a maze she didn't remember building. The recliner, once comforting, now swallowed her in ways that didn't feel restful. The entertainment center blocked light. The coffee table became a bruise magnet for her shins. She didn't complain, not out loud. But inside, she knew. Her home had been furnished for a life that no longer matched her reality. Many seniors face this same quiet burden. We design our homes to suit family life, busy schedules, storage needs, and social gatherings. But when those chapters fade, the furniture remains. Heavy, outdated, and oddly unkind to the version of ourselves we've become. Maren didn't need a renovation. She didn't want to modernize her space. She simply wanted to breathe easier in it, to move without hesitation, to stretch out without bumping into the past. She began by removing one item, the end table that only held dust and anxiety. Then she let go of the wobbly side chair no one sat in. Piece by piece, her space opened up. And with that, so did her body language. She stood taller. She moved more freely. She started noticing the way the afternoon sun filled the corner where the entertainment center used to cast shadows. Your home should move with you, not against you. Heavy furniture doesn't just strain your back, it can quietly stall your spirit. If something in your home makes you feel trapped, boxed in, or hesitant to move, it may be time to ask whether it's supporting your life or just surviving in it. Trigger 5. Guilt, gifts, and inherited obligations. There was a vase in Maren's hallway, delicate, floral, hand-painted. It had belonged to her late Aunt Cordelia, who was known for her strong opinions and stronger perfumes. Maren never liked the vase. It clashed with everything else in her home. But there it stood, quietly gathering dust for nearly 2 decades. Next to it, a painting of a lake scene, blue-gray and somber, a gift from a neighbor who had since moved away. And in her kitchen cabinet sat a silver serving tray she hadn't used since the 2004 Thanksgiving dinner, when her oldest son still lived nearby. She didn't enjoy cleaning it. She didn't like displaying it. But it had been her mother's, and something about letting it go felt disrespectful. These weren't treasures. They were traps. Maren didn't keep them because they made her happy. She kept them because throwing them away, or even donating them, felt like turning her back on people who once mattered. She told herself stories. What if my cousin visits and notices the vase is gone? Or it's not hurting anything to keep it a little longer. But deep down, she knew these weren't mementos of love. They were relics of obligation. So many seniors carry this hidden emotional weight. We're taught to be grateful, to hold on, to never be ungrateful for gifts, especially from those who've passed. But the truth is, gratitude doesn't mean you must build a shrine around every object. And love doesn't live in old trays and ugly paintings. It lives in your memories, in your actions, in your peace. Maren finally asked herself, if this item were a stranger's, would I still keep it? That question changed everything. She gently wrapped up the vase, placed it in a donation box, and whispered a quiet thank you for the memory, not the object. Then she moved on. She didn't throw away love. She let go of guilt. You might be surprised how many things in your home you're only keeping because you're afraid of what it might mean if you let them go. But what it actually means is that you're choosing yourself, your clarity, your freedom. What's one thing in your home you've kept purely because someone gave it to you, even if it doesn't bring you joy? Share it in the comments. You're not alone, and you're allowed to make space for things that truly reflect your present, not someone else's past. Trigger 6. Unfinished projects that mock you. Maren once started knitting a scarf in the fall, bright orange and gold, meant to be a gift for her neighbor's new baby. She got about a third of the way through before her hands started cramping more than usual. She set it aside just for the weekend. That was 3 years ago. The scarf still sits in a basket by her couch, quietly judging her. Nearby, there's a yoga mat she bought after her doctor suggested gentle stretching could help her back. She used it once, maybe twice. It's now rolled up in the corner, collecting dust. And in her closet, a neatly packaged birdhouse kit sits untouched, something she'd ordered with hopes of doing a fun craft project with her grandkids. But every time they visited, there was never quite enough time or energy. None of these things were mistakes. They started with good intentions, small bursts of excitement, and the desire to stay active, engaged, and creative. But now, Maren doesn't see them as opportunities. She sees them as reminders. Each object whispers, "You didn't follow through." And with every glance, a subtle wave of guilt rises. Guilt for changing, for slowing down, for not being the woman who once loved starting new things. This is something many older adults experience in silence. The unfinished quilt, the piano book left on the stand, the gardening gloves never worn. It's not about laziness or lack of interest. Often, it's simply that the energy those hobbies require no longer matches the joy they bring. But the items remain, reminding you of all the things you once thought you'd finish. And here's the hard part. Letting them sit there doesn't motivate you. It chips away at your confidence. For Maren, the breaking point wasn't the yoga mat or the scarf. It was an unopened bottle of herbal supplements she'd bought 6 months earlier, promising herself she'd start on Monday. Finding it, still sealed in her bathroom cabinet, made her pause. It wasn't the cost. It was the realization that she'd been holding onto the idea of progress, not progress itself. She threw it away, not because she gave up, but because she forgave herself. Letting go of unfinished projects doesn't mean you're giving up on joy. It means you're creating space for new joy, joy that fits who you are now. Trigger 7. Health products she no longer uses. Maren opened her bathroom cabinet one afternoon, looking for a new bottle of lotion. But before she could even find it, she was staring at half a shelf of old prescription bottles, tubes of ointment with faded labels, and a crooked box of vitamins that rattled like a maraca. She hadn't used most of them in years. Some belonged to conditions that had long since resolved. Others were duplicates from a time when every ache felt urgent enough to treat twice. There was the wrist brace her doctor had recommended when she briefly had tendinitis. She wore it for 2 weeks, then forgot it even existed. There were 3 types of muscle rubs, 2 opened, 1 never touched. A roll of gauze from a knee scrape that healed 4 summers ago. And a bottle of fish oil that expired during the last presidential administration. At a glance, it all seemed harmless. But Marin realized something strange. Every time she opened that cabinet, she flinched just a little. Not from pain, but from memory. Each item carried a whisper of discomfort, a season of limitation, a symptom she tried to fix. And even though her body had moved on, the clutter hadn't. That small cabinet had quietly become a museum of every minor health crisis she'd endured over the past decade, and she was still curating it. Many seniors do this without thinking. We hold on to medical products because they cost money, or because you never know when you'll need them again. But what we don't realize is how those objects subtly reinforce a narrative that your body is fragile, always one step from falling apart. That healing is temporary and discomfort is a given. That preparing for the worst is wiser than believing in better. But healing isn't just physical, it's also emotional. And sometimes, letting go of that used knee wrap or expired bottle is an act of reclaiming your strength. Marin didn't throw everything away in one go. She started small, clearing one shelf, checking dates, asking herself, do I even remember what this was for? And the space that opened up wasn't just in her cabinet. It was in her mind. If your bathroom or medicine drawer feels more like a reminder of your limitations than a support for your wellness, maybe it's time to clean it with kindness. Not as a chore, but as a declaration, I am not the sum of my symptoms. Trigger 8. Old tech and dead devices. Marin was looking for her address book when she opened the side drawer in her hallway cabinet, a drawer she hadn't touched in months. What greeted her wasn't paper or pens, but a nest of tangled cords, loose batteries, 3 old remote controls, and a flip phone she hadn't used since her grandson was in middle school. There were chargers to devices she couldn't name anymore. A dusty Bluetooth speaker that never quite worked. A broken clock radio with a cracked dial. She even found the instruction manual for a digital camera she'd given away 10 years earlier. She stared at it all, unsure whether to laugh or sigh. At first, it seemed harmless, just another drawer of forgotten tech. But as she looked closer, Marin realized something deeper. None of these things worked anymore, but she still held on to them. Not because she'd need them again, but because they were familiar, tangible. Proof of a time when technology made sense, when things had buttons instead of voice commands, when you plug something in and it simply worked. For many older adults, this quiet pileup of old electronics isn't just clutter, it's a comfort. Not in how it functions, but in what it represents. It reminds them of a time when life felt slower, simpler, more human. When phones were for calling, not managing your entire life. When a radio dial felt like a companion. But here's the truth. These dead devices become anchors. Not to our memories, but to frustration. Every time Marin opened that drawer, she felt a twinge of failure. A reminder that she hadn't kept up. That the world had moved on faster than she could adapt. That's not just inconvenient. It's disheartening. So she asked herself, am I keeping these because I love them, or because I'm afraid of what letting them go might mean? Slowly, she began clearing the drawer, not with bitterness, but with gratitude for what those items once gave her. And with every outdated charger she tossed, she felt lighter. Letting go of old tech isn't giving in to the fast pace of modern life. It's making peace with the fact that not everything has to be saved to be remembered. You can honor the past without keeping its wires tangled in your present. Trigger 9. Rooms that no longer serve them. Marin stood in the doorway of her dining room one afternoon, holding a warm mug of tea, just staring. The table was still set for 8 placemats, polished wood, even a decorative bowl in the center with faded faux fruit. It looked perfect, untouched, but the last time it had been used was 2 Thanksgivings ago, and even then, only half the chairs were filled. The guest room down the hall was just as still, clean, quiet, with fresh linens folded over the bed, and a lamp she hadn't turned on in months. It smelled faintly of lavender spray. She kept it tidy just in case someone visited, But no one had. Not a long time. For years, Marin had been preserving these rooms like open invitations. Spaces prepared not for herself, but for other people, her children, her grandchildren, old friends who no longer traveled. It was hospitality wrapped in hope. But as time went on, that hope turned into pressure. She finally asked herself a question she hadn't dared voice before. Why am I giving space to people who aren't here when I barely have room to breathe? That moment hit hard. This kind of clutter isn't made of things. It's made of expectations. Of rooms waiting for a version of life that's no longer active. For many seniors, it's the most invisible form of emotional weight. We hold on to these spaces as symbols of generosity, family, possibility. But in doing so, we sometimes shrink our own lives. We put the best light, the nicest furniture, the biggest windows in rooms we rarely enter, while we eat dinner alone in the kitchen nook. Marin realized that by preserving these empty spaces, she had robbed herself of comfort. What if she turned the guest room into an art studio? What if the dining room became a library with her favorite books and a reading chair that faced the sun? Letting go of unused rooms isn't selfish. It's sovereign. It's reclaiming your home to serve your life today, not the life you hope might stop by once a year. You don't need to explain or apologize. You're allowed to repurpose space for you, because your comfort doesn't need a reason beyond this. You deserve it. Is there a room in your home that's quietly waiting for someone else, while your current needs are being squeezed into corners? Tell us below. Marin didn't wake up one morning and decide to overhaul her entire home. That would have felt overwhelming, unrealistic, and frankly, unnecessary. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted to feel lighter, to walk in her own home and exhale. So, she made herself a quiet promise, one thing a day. Every morning, before coffee, she'd look around and ask a simple question. What here no longer fits my life today? Then she'd remove just one thing. Not 10, not a room full, just one. Some days it was small, a chipped mug with no handle. A calendar from last year still pinned behind the door. Other days it was heavier, not in weight but in meaning. A dress she hadn't worn since her anniversary dinner. A lamp that reminded her of someone she missed too much. A drawer full of cables for devices she didn't even own anymore. She didn't rush it. She didn't announce it. She just let the practice happen. What surprised her most wasn't how much she let go of. It was how much she noticed once she started. With each item, a memory surfaced. Not always sad, sometimes funny, sometimes warm, but often layered with expectations that no longer match her life. Letting go wasn't about rejection. It was about release. By the end of 30 days, Marin hadn't downsized. Her house still held all the essentials, but it felt bigger, airier, as if she had peeled away the noise and left only what sang softly. Light reached corners it hadn't in years, partly because of fewer objects, but also because Marin moved differently. She stopped tiptoeing around the past. She started reaching for things she actually used. She sat in chairs that made her feel good. She opened closets without bracing herself. And slowly, something shifted inside her. She didn't miss what she gave away. She thought she might, but she didn't. What she missed was herself. The version of her who felt confident, capable, free. The woman who didn't feel guilty about resting. The one who didn't carry emotional weight in baskets and boxes around the house. That version of Marin didn't return in one day. But with each thing she released, she cleared space for that woman to breathe again. If you're feeling stuck or weighed down in your home, don't wait for the perfect time. Start with one thing, one drawer, one shelf, one object that no longer reflects who you are. Because one small release, done daily, can rebuild something bigger than a home. It can rebuild your peace. Your home should be your retreat, your place of comfort, restoration, and joy. Not a museum full of dusty expectations, not a warehouse for who you used to be. It should feel like it fits you, right now as you are. For Marin, the turning point wasn't just the act of letting go. It was realizing that her home no longer reflected her life today. It reflected her memories, her responsibilities, her some days, but not her present. And that disconnect between who she was and how her home still looked was where the weight came from. A home isn't just about square footage or pretty decor. It's a mirror. And if that mirror only shows past versions of yourself, who you were as a spouse, a parent, a hostess, a caregiver, it can make the present feel like a step down instead of a fresh chapter. But what if your home shifted with you? What if it grew lighter as you did? What if each room made you feel calm, not cluttered, capable, not crowded? What if your living room wasn't arranged for guests who never arrive, but for the person you wake up as each morning? You don't have to start over. You don't have to clear out everything. But you do deserve a space that supports who you are becoming, not who you're trying to keep alive out of guilt or habit. So ask yourself this. What's one item in your home that holds you back more than it holds meaning? A drawer full of unused chargers? A chair you never sit in? A sweater that belonged to a version of you from years ago? Release doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing freedom over fear, peace over pressure, room to breathe. If this video helped you breathe a little deeper or see your home a little differently, tap that like button. Subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors for more simple shifts that bring real comfort. And share this with someone whose home might be carrying more than it should. You don't need more space. You just need permission. Permission to live in the present. Permission to let go. Permission to come home to yourself.